Yeah, an evening all. Caroline is going to give us a talk on Capercaillie conservation. She's the project officer for the Saving Capercaillie in the Cairngorms, and has been busy on a whole raft of things. Typically, they're on the other side of the Cairngorms to us. If you go over to Speyside, you see a lot of evidence of efforts to save Caper. They're less visible on our side. And one of Caroline's targets for this year is to get similar schemes running on our side to try and help this bird, which almost is in free fall. So it's a pretty desperate situation. And I think a lot of us would like to see it be saved. So tonight, Caroline's going to tell us about the themes that they're working on to try and save Capercaillie. So thank you, and here, hand over to Caroline.
Super, thank you so much. And yeah, thanks everybody for dialing in. I do recognise it's a lovely evening outside, and yeah, I'm sure some of you have also been at the screen all day as well. Yeah, well. Super. So yeah, as I work for the Cairngorms Capercaillie project, so I'm employed by the Cairngorms National Park Authority to look after this project, which I've been doing for nearly 5 years now. So when it comes to Q&A, yeah, I hope I can answer most questions, but I thought I would start with some questions for you, a little bit of a quiz. Apparently you are allowed to unmute yourself and shout out the answers, so feel free to do so. Hopefully it's not too taxing for Thursday night. First question, how many eggs? Any answers? Or shall I just tell you? There are 10 eggs in that nest, and it's a Capercaillie nest. If you've never seen one before, which I've never seen a Capercaillie nest before, but this is how they nest. So they build a nest on the forest floor lined with Capercaillie feathers from the female, and usually it's about 8 to 10 eggs in a clutch. And that in itself is what makes the species so vulnerable. As you can imagine, that's easily something that predators could find. So that's foxes, crows, pine martens, badgers will get hold of those eggs. Or we may flush the hen off the nest and she may not return and those eggs chill. So that's kind of challenge number one for Capercaillie. It's typically the case that only one bird will make it all the way through to adulthood. Next question is, how old do you think this little Capercaillie is?
Not very.
Not very, no. First few weeks, probably first week of its life, this is what a Capercaillie looks like. So for one, it's made it off the forest floor and into the trees, which will mean it's a little bit safer from predators. The main challenges it faces at that age of its life is getting cold, as it will need to return to the forest floor to feed. So it feeds on insects in the first part of its life. And where you've got long heather, for example, that gets quite wet, Capercaillie chicks running through that themselves get wet and cold. And so hypothermia is a big issue for Capra at that age. And again, predation and getting separated from their mothers, perhaps again through our activities, and we break up a family brood and they don't return. But assuming it makes it through those challenges, next question was, how many birds can you see? This is one of those kind of magic eye images. So there are 4 birds, 4 Capercaillie in that image. So you've got a female right in the middle, and you've got, as you look at it, 1 bird to the right with his back to us and 2 birds heading off to the left. So this image is taken sort of late June, early August. And so this is what size they are at this point. And they're still dependent on their mother at this point, and they're hanging out in that root plate, basically cleaning themselves. So they're bathing in the sands and the soil, removing any ticks or any parasites that they might have. This is a clearer image of a bird at that age. So this is a Capercaillie, probably August time, and this is going to be a female, so a smart little female Capercaillie in August. And if she makes it through and grows up into an adult, this is what she's going to look like. And this hen, as they call them, she is at a lek. And so this is what the hens do. They sit in the branches around the edge whilst the men do their thing on the forest floor. So this image here is from a trail camera on Balmoral. So this boy is clearly the top dog on that lek, and then he gets into a scrap with another male who comes in vying for position. But hopefully one of them is successful, and then this is the sort of holy scene where you've got an alpha male and he's done his thing and he's attracted these females who've come down from their trees to mate with him. And what we're doing right now, so this very evening, there are members of the team out in hides like this and land managers as well, all looking for the birds that attend a lek and counting them. So in the early hours, so anything from like 4 in the morning all the way through till 10 in the morning, the birds will be lekking in the forest. And it's our job and land managers' jobs to count the number of birds in that lek to give us a rough sense of the population size. So looks exciting, but actually it's quite hard work. If you talk to anyone that's doing it at the moment, it's fairly intense. But hopefully it's promising. So far, so good. Some of the lek counts that we've done already show a slight increase. So that's good because we have had quite a nice dry spring so far. And that's meant the birds are a bit more active and coming to lek. And if folk in the team aren't doing that, then this is what they're doing. This is our patrol team. So this gang of folk, including myself, have for the month of April so far, and we'll carry on into May, doing dawn patrols from 5:30 in the morning through to about 9:30 around lek areas to essentially discourage bird watchers and photographers from trying to find Capercaillie and flushing them away from their lek when actually just need to be left in peace to breed. So it's our job to just give people advice of where the sensitive areas are and encourage them to head in another direction and avoid those areas. And so far, so good. We've had some really good chats in those early hours of people that are in the woods, enjoying the woods at that time of year and don't want to cause Kappa any issues. And if they make it through the breeding season and hens do breed, the very first thing they're going to be doing is looking for this plant, this cotton grass that we find in our forest bogs, because that's really rich in protein. And that's what they need to be healthy when they're breeding and raising their chicks. So they gorge on this cotton grass, which is around and about, but there's some areas where there's not a lot of it. So one of the things we've been doing in Deeside, so this is on Balmoral Estate, and this is Glyn, who some of you may know, the head ranger at Balmoral, and some volunteers, restoring forest bogs. So in the past where we've drained bogs, so we've cut ditches in them and let them run out, we're now stitching those ditches back together and letting it re-wet and restore itself. So it's better habitat for female Capercaillie in particular. And hundreds of acres, about 600 hectares, of land have been restored on Balmoral Estate for Kappa, and a lot of it has been that forest bog restoration, which they've been doing. Along with ring barking, so this is another of the things that we've been doing over your way, is hacking at trees, which is quite fun. Just taking the bark off the circumference of the tree, which eventually causes the tree to die, and then you create standing deadwood, which is a really insect-rich habitat, which again the chicks need in those early stages, all of those insects to feed on. And another thing we've been doing across the park, but including over your way, and this isn't a Deeside image, this is over in Strathspey, but a similar length of fence, so just under 2 kilometres of fence on Invercald, we have now marked, because one of the issues that the birds experience as they get older and then more mobile is they do fly into fences if they can't see them, and that can end badly and in death. So just marking them with wooden droppers means that the birds can see them, they're more visible. But it's a lot of effort to do that. And you can imagine a 2 kilometre fence is a fair fence to mark. And we're doing all this because we ultimately know that people in Deeside, even though the numbers of birds over there are so low, do care about Capercaillie. So as a project, we never like to assume that people want to come on board and work with us to look after Capercaillie. So we always do our research first, and that involves asking the community that we're about to approach or we'd like to work with how they feel about Capercaillie. So we did a survey, it's actually a couple of years ago now, but 768 people who live and work in Deeside or visit the area completed the online survey, and of all those folk, almost everybody, 98% of people, told us that they feel we should protect Capercaillie in Deeside for future generations, that even if they never see a Capercaillie, they think it's important that they exist in the area. And 88% felt that it's what you do for Capercaillie is also beneficial to other species. So it's a win-win. Whether or not you're doing it for Capercaillie, other species will benefit as well. So for us, that was really positive. It was a mandate then to come over your side of the hill and start doing stuff as we have been over the last year or so. And it's a mandate because, yeah, you're supportive of the cause, but the cause is a critical one. So if you're not aware already of the really low numbers of Capercaillie now, so we had a population of around 20,000 birds in the late 1970s, early 1980s, and we now know we've only got 542 birds left in the UK, and that's based on a winter survey that was done over the last winter. So that's about 3-4 months of work, walking over 700 transects through Kappa habitats to record the numbers of birds seen and then extrapolate that figure to get to 542. So we're 95% confident that that is how many birds we have left. And not only are the numbers critically low, but the population has also dramatically retracted back to the Cairngorms National Park. It's almost like it's an endemic species now to the national park. There are some outlying populations, but very, very small. In some cases, it's literally just one bird, one male who's turning up to a lek all on his own. So they are 85% of the UK Capercaillie population lives in the national park. And if I share this, sorry, it's a little bit pixelated, this map, but the pink areas show where Capercaillie are present in the park. So you can see that the majority of the population is in Badenoch and Strathspey, and that's why we've been putting a lot of effort in there, because that's where most of the birds are. You've got a really small number of birds over towards Blair Athol, again, like sort of 4 or 5 birds, not a big population at all. And then the remaining birds are over your way in Deeside. But again, the numbers are not big, so we think anything up to kind of 30, 40 birds might be in Deeside. And the other colours on the map are where they could be, so where there's potential habitat, but the birds haven't moved into that space for whatever reason. And if you drill into that map a little bit more, so this is zooming into your side of the hill, the lines on the map, the pink line is the boundary of Balmoral Estate, and the sort of purpley line is the boundary of Glentana, and then the black line is the edge of the national park. So those two landholdings, Glentana and Balmoral, are where the majority of Capercaillie live in Deeside, and Balmoral has the lion's share. And both of those landholdings are protected for Capercaillie, so they're special protected areas and they're designated for Capercaillie. And it's Balmoral that in Deeside we've been doing the most work with. And one of the things we've been doing across the park and including Deeside is picking up feathers, because when you've got such low numbers of birds and they're all a bit spread out as they are, there is a real risk that they're starting to inbreed. So you've got these small isolated populations. So the potential for them to inbreed is quite high. And what we want to know is whether or not that's happening or about to happen, because that then would pave the way to boost the population and bring in new birds to boost the gene pool. So we've been picking up feathers from the forest floor. It's about a year's worth of work to pick up just over 1,000 feathers, and this is literally how they were arriving in the office, where you've got keepers and foresters and volunteers out spotting feathers, sticking them in an envelope and then posting them to the National Park Office. And what we've done since with those feathers is we've been working with RZSS in their wild genes lab in Edinburgh Zoo to cut the quills of those feathers and extract the DNA and analyse that DNA to work out what the genetic diversity of the population in the park is. And we've also been sourcing, or I say we, RZSS, have also been sourcing historical specimens as well. So some birds here that are from Russia, so that we can look back historically to see what the genetic diversity was in the past, not just within the UK, but also globally. And that then gives us a good reference point of what the situation is for the birds in the UK, how kind of genetically impoverished they are, for example, versus other parts of their range. And we've just finished that work now, so we've just got the final report, and it is really, really interesting to see that where the population, the UK population, went extinct in the 1800s, whether or not actually we did lose all the birds, or there are a couple of birds that remained, we just didn't know they were there, and actually their genes have continued all the way to the current day. So we're just digging through all that information at the moment. And so I focused there on habitat work and genetic research, but actually what the lion's share of the project's work is around recreational disturbance, because that's one of the major challenges for Capercaillie, according to a Nature Scott report that came out a year ago. It's predation and human disturbance that are now seen as the two major issues facing Capercaillie. So this, as I'm sure you recognise, is a map of recreational activity in the national park mapped by Strava. And if you remember that map where Capercaillie population, with quite a lot of that is happening in the same place, so high levels of recreation in Capper areas. And we don't for a minute want to stop that recreational activity. We think it's fantastic from a National Park Authority point of view that people are able to enjoy the park in the way that they are. What we want to do is find a way for that to continue, whilst also making sure that Capercaillie are able to exist and thrive free from disturbance. So I was just going to chat through one example of a community that we've been working with now over the last couple of years, and that's the mountain biking community in Badenoch and Straths Bay. So we did this all through COVID lockdown. So this was what we did. I spent a lot of time doing is what's on Zoom calls and workshops. So much like I shared with those survey results from D-Side, we did a similar thing with mountain bikers in Badenoch and Straths Bay. We developed an online survey and we asked mountain bikers to complete it and share their views. And unsurprisingly, turns out that the majority of them, again, like sort of 99% of them, care about the environment they ride in, want to make sure they're doing the right thing and looking after that environment, and were willing to change behaviours if that's what it meant in terms of looking after species like Capercaillie while still enjoying the trails in Badenoch and Straths Bay. So we put a shout out and brought together about 30 riders. And if anyone knows the mountain biking scene, you've got here some well-known faces who run mountain biking guiding over this side of the hill. They run shops. There's even Jamie Edmondson, who's a pro rider in the mix as well. So a really good spread of folk, again, age-wise and gender-wise, who came together, and we worked through a series of workshops to help them identify what they could do as a community to help Capercaillie. And that started by sharing lots of data. So we mapped, and this is what this map is, we mapped mountain biking trails and laid over Capercaillie data so that the mountain bikers in that group could see where their trails sat alongside Capercaillie. So this map, I've sort of simplified it a bit, but what it contains are dots where you've got lek sites and also larger areas where you've got habitat that hens use to raise their chicks. And I think the thing that the mountain biking group found a little bit mind-blowing was the lack of wiggle room. Literally, their trails are everywhere that their trails are everywhere that Capper also are, because actually they favour a similar kind of habitat. Capper like a kind of dry Scots pine forest, and mountain bikers like a similar thing. But we mapped that data, and what we realized that actually the data that exists, for example, on Strava and Trailforks, is only half the data there in terms of trails. So we recruited an intern who worked with us for a couple of months, and he rode 250 kilometers of unmapped mountain bike trails, which was, I think, his favorite job ever. But that then provided us with a load more data as where mountain bikers are and where Capercaillie are. And that then enabled us to work with them to produce this recreation management plan. So this is mountain bikers identifying where their activity overlays with Capercaillie and then working out how they can manage that. So this isn't the national park telling mountain bikers what to do, where to go, how to manage their trails. This is themselves identifying the issue and coming up with solutions. So this is a map for Badenoch and Strathspey, but you can roughly see areas where they're important for mountain biking, but the sensitive areas, for example, are also used by Capercaillie. So they've put a boundary around that, and they're going to manage that sensitively, knowing that Capercaillie use those areas. So it's early days for this process at the moment, but some of the stuff that they've done already, for example, is rerouting some trails. Like they had one trail that started in a bog, which actually no mountain biker wants to start riding in a bog, but that's where it was. And instead, as I've explained, hens want to use that bog to access cotton grass. So they've taken that trail and they've moved it out of the bog, and it now cuts a different line down the hill. And in the process, they've given that bog back to Capercaillie, and actually they've got a much nicer ride as well, because they don't start with wet feet. So it's little interventions like this, which actually, if you keep doing that across a large area, it does have quite a big impact, not just for Capercaillie, but also from a riding perspective as well. And then other things that they've done is they've developed some signage. So again, this is mountain bikers deciding what they should be saying to other mountain bikers to encourage responsible mountain biking in Capper areas. From April to August, when the birds are breeding and there's a chance that they might be riding through an area where chicks are being raised, for example. So this signage is now popping up in various places in Badenoch and Strathspey. And ultimately, the aim with the mountain biking community is about developing the trail association, so that when the project ends, as we finish our work at the end of this year, the Trail Association in Badenoch and Strathspey has enough capacity to continue the good work that it's been doing with us, and it can run on hopefully for years to come. They're now much more informed about what they can do to help Capercaillie, and they're bringing in lots of volunteers. So this is a dig day, running again to restore a trail, to stop it eroding and taking up more Capper habitat. And the other things they're keen to do is develop that signage and trail information so it's consistent, it's helpful, it's there for visiting and local riders so that they can do the right thing and also become more aware of the issue and hopefully take action to help Capercaillie. And on a kind of micro scale, we've just started to do that over your way, over in Deeside. So Ballock Buoy on the Balmoral estate is a Capper hotspot, and there's a track that runs right through the middle of that forest, as well as there's other access tracks around the outside. But the one that runs right through the middle runs through a really sensitive area for Capercaillie. So you could literally be walking on that path and flush Capercaillie on a lek. It's used by hens to raise their young. So there's lots of evidence of Capercaillie on that track. What the estate, working with ourselves, are experimenting with this year is putting up this sign on the left-hand side of this slide to encourage people to take an alternative route. So it's not saying you can't use that route, but voluntarily head off somewhere else to access and enjoy Ballock Buoy, and just don't head through that middle route. And we've done a baseline survey of that route already, so we know the level of use from Capercaillie. We've put this sign up. Hopefully people will take that choice and head in a different route, head in a different direction, and then we'll do another survey of that track afterwards to see whether more Capercaillie have used it and been able to use that area in general, because we haven't been there. So it's that kind of solution that we spend a lot of our time working up as a project, and all the while it's with trying to do it from the bottom up rather than coming top down. And that's where I was going to leave it, actually, just in terms of kind of giving a quick whistle-stop tour of some of the things that we've been doing, but trying to, highlight the things that we've been doing over in your neck of the woods. And we've still got, as I say, just shy of a year to go. So there's still lots more to do. The most important thing is we know that Capercaillie are considered worth saving in Deeside. So that means we will definitely continue working on it.
Excellent. Thank you for that. If people have got questions for Carolyn, can I encourage them to put them in the chat? There's one already. So there's a good idea regarding mountain bikes, but what's happening with regards to dog walkers? There's a massive increase in irresponsible dog ownership. Dogs off the leads can kill, and also dogs go off trail, creating huge disturbance. I saw one of your signs was encouraging people to keep dogs on the trail, but that's very difficult.
Yeah, and it's a good question. It comes up a lot, actually, about the about dog walkers, because we now know. So we've done some research in Badenoch and Strathspey, and I'm sure perhaps Deeside is no different, but there are just under 6,500 resident dogs in Badenoch and Strathspey, and that's just the resident ones. And then you consider you might have anything up to 150,000 dogs coming with visitors. So it's really doggy. And that is an issue for Kappa, there's no doubt about that. Whether a dog is on the lead or off the lead, Kappa see them as a predator, so are fearful of them and will not use available habitat if it's heavily used by dogs or dog walkers and their dogs. So we have only just started working with the dog walking community, and we've just started over this side of the hill. Again, surveying them to find out how they feel about Capercaillie, what they feel they can do, and what they're willing to do. And then we've been working that through with a group of dog owners, dog trainers, vets, dog breeders. There's a huntsman in the mix as well, so folk that are really connected to dogs. And we've identified that signage is an issue, that actually there is quite a lot of signage for dog walkers, but it's a bit mixed messages, and it's not always really positive either. It's not sort of spurring a dog walker on to do the right thing. So there's something there about developing signage for dog walkers to be more effective. And there's also something about developing more dog friendly areas, places that are fit for purpose for dogs to do their thing, that are away from sensitive areas, because we've found in Badenoch and Strathspey at least that there are areas that would be absolutely fine for a dog to spend time in, and arguably better, easier to access, bigger, safer, etc., than where they're currently going. So we're just working on that at the moment, but what's definitely evident is it's a huge piece of work in itself. So we're developing a longer term plan that the Park Authority will take forward when the project ends, to make sure that work is seen all the way through, because there's lots of work to do on that front. I agree with you.
Yeah, that sort of led to my own question as to you're indicating that the project ends this year, and what will follow on from it. Do you expect that the park will continue it themselves?
Definitely, yeah. There's quite a lot of work that we'll need to carry on, because we haven't managed to do everything in the time that we've had, and so that will be carried forward by the National Park Authority. But there is also thoughts around a Capercaillie emergency plan brewing. So because the numbers are so low, that there are some things that we need to do in addition to what we've been doing as a project. So there'll be a bigger sort of strategy, as it were, to support Capercaillie. So definitely work will continue post-project. We won't be just stopping there, and especially given that we've had so much support from volunteers. I mean, volunteers have given over 4,000 hours of their time to this project so far. There's some folk who are heavily invested in seeing this through. So if we're not here in 12 months' time, they'll still be ploughing on, and they need support to do that. So that's where the Park Authority will come in and pick that up.
Okay, and returning to the chat then, is an alternative route identified, or is it more firmly suggested or even required? And does that apply to walking and biking routes?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. So my understanding is, because I haven't actually been on site at Balmoral to see the sign since they've installed it, but that's the sign that sits on the trail. And before that, there's some more information about Ballock Buoy and the various access points. So that, I think, would give you the information you need if you're trying to get to point A. There's a map there that can show you how to get there if you don't go through that middle track. So I haven't worked with the estate to work up an alternative route map or anything, but as far as I know, they have that. So it's hopefully fairly easy for folk to take a different route.
I'm going to jump to Alistair's question there, because that's related. Is the info on the trails to avoid available online? It might be too late by the time people arrive. They may already have very firm plans.
Yeah, so in short, no, that information is not, as far as I know, is not available online. So one of the things that we've realised through the project is there is a lack of information about where the sensitive areas are. Or there's kind of just very broad brush, like this is a Capper area, but it doesn't tell you enough to make a good decision about where to go, where not to go in that area. So we've been mapping Capercaillie data, a bit like with the mountain biking work, but beyond that, we've been mapping Capercaillie data over trail data, so that we can, a bit like we've done with Ballock Buoy, work out where there's actually some really kind of critical points where it would be better if we could give folk an alternative route. So we're in the process of doing that, and then we'll make that information available, and online would make sense. Yeah, as you say, if people are trying to plan a route before they set off and they don't want to find that the thing that they've planned is going to cause Capper an issue once they're on the ground. So yeah, again, it's a good point, and you would think it would be simple, but actually it's taken us a while just to get all the Capper data in one place to work out where the kind of conflicts lie.
Yeah, I suppose there's some conflict with wanting to make it too widely known where the birds are.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
that's definitely a thing. So they're a Schedule 1 species protected under UK law, so you cannot just share Capercaillie data, as you can imagine, willy-nilly, as you wouldn't do with a raptor, protected raptor, for example. But there's definitely like a happy place to get to, where we got to with the mountain biking community, where we did actually share quite a lot of data with them. And for them, that was a real light bulb moment, because they'd never seen that data before. They'd never understood how their riding activities were running alongside Capper. So I think we've learned through the project that actually, if you trust people, they will do the right thing. They understand what they've been given. They understand they've been given sensitive data, and we haven't found that the mountain biking community have spread it all over the internet. They've been really respectful of it and made the best of it. So there's no reason why we couldn't do that with another community of needs.
Okay, and I'm going to go back to Dave's question. Has any thought been given to helping people to see Capper, maybe via suitable hides, to help get buy-in? Might mean quite an early start.
Yeah, it's gosh, that one comes up all the time, because there was a really good Capper watch experience, as I'm sure many of you know, at Loch Garten, that the RSPB ran for years until the Lek moved, and they tried to restore the habitat there to encourage the birds back, but they didn't come back, and so that's no longer a thing. And when we've looked at that previously through the Scottish Capercaillie group, that there was some chat with Forestry and Land Scotland about potentially busing people to an area, but logistically it's quite a challenge, and just the cost, the sort of operating costs at the time were considered to be too much. So we've never managed to crack that one, and the closest we've got more recently is talking to the Highland Wildlife Park about offering some experiences, but they will still be with captive birds, so it won't be quite the same. And we also have been chatting about putting more live stream cameras onto dust baths, so people can watch that online, which again, it's quite engaging. It's not the same thing as seeing the birds, but we're trying our best to kind of meet people in the middle, because we do recognise that, yeah, there's a lot to be said. People do want to see the birds. And also, as you say, it's that buy-in thing, it's that connecting and understanding and therefore caring more and doing the right thing. But yeah, if we could nail that one, I think it would solve a lot of problems.
Yes. And then there's a question from Judy. Some areas, perhaps Benahee, perhaps also Glentana, where there's a lone bird. Have you thought about a breeding program? And then a supplementary, the workapper on Fingham Estate. She doesn't know if they're still there.
Yeah, as far as I know, there are still, there is definitely still Kappa just outside the park boundary, and we've been working with the estates there to actually put up a similar redirect sign where otherwise people are heading into a sensitive area. So there's definitely Kappa still around there. In terms of the breeding program, I think that would end up being some sort of reinforcement program where we would bring birds in to boost the population. There is a program in Poland where they have created essentially a huge forest aviary, and they've got females and chicks in that aviary growing in the forest, and then they'll remove them from that aviary and they'll hopefully go on and live long, happy lives. Again, it's just very, very expensive. So that project alone is about €4.5 million, and they've had to do an intensive level of predator control. So they've actually had to kill about 400 Capercaillie predators to protect those hens and their chicks and allow them to get off to a flying start. So again, it's quite complicated to make that sort of thing happen and do it well. So we haven't got there yet to chatting about a breeding program. It's also quite difficult to get Kappa to breed in captivity because they have such sort of specialist breeding kind of, the lek thing is quite difficult to recreate in captivity. So they often don't breed well in captivity, hence the fact this Poland project is about just letting them do their thing in the forest, but protecting them from predators predominantly. And
while we're thinking about other areas, where is there a global population if you were to consider further reintroduction? Where would they have come from?
It would probably be Scandinavia. What we've found from the genetic research we've been doing, that our UK population is most closely related to the Scandinavian population, probably because that's where they got boosted from last time in the 1800s. And whilst no Capercaillie population anywhere in their range, which extends from Russia all the way across Europe down to the Pyrenees and through Scandinavia and into the UK, none of those populations are doing particularly well. They're all facing their own challenges, but probably the biggest, healthiest population anyway is in Scandinavia. So if we were going to take birds from anywhere, it would be there, I would think.
Okay, and then there's a question about the typical lifespan of an adult Kappa, and perhaps also I could add a rider to that. What's the breeding success of reaching adulthood?
So the typical lifespan is about 10 years. They're quite a long-lived bird. But in terms of productivity, yeah, I mean, they're a bit like pandas. They're really not very productive. So yeah, you're talking about kind of one chick per 8, making it all the way through to adulthood. So that is one of their major issues, is they're not particularly productive as a species. And what we're finding at the moment with the population in the national park, at least, is that the numbers of hens are falling, which is often an indication that a species is on the way out if you're losing the females because they're not so long-lived. And so probably what we've got in the national park is quite an old population. I mean, I don't know, but I imagine, the average age of Capercaillie in the park might be sort of 5 or 6 years old. And so the hens are getting to the point in their life where they're not that productive, which is only making the situation worse. You've got old boys and unproductive hens. So this is why I think, yeah, there's a lot of chat about, it feels like reinforcement, it might be the only way out for them at the moment, but that, as I say, is quite complicated thing to do.
Yeah, it sounds a very challenging project that you've taken on. Andrew's asking, for land managers, what would be the key steps to take to improve habitat for Kappa?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends, yeah, what they've got already in terms of opportunity on the land for Kappa. But some of the typical things we've been doing, bit like I was sharing with the Balmoral examples, is restoring forest bog. That definitely helps the hens. Providing more cover, also in terms of avoiding predators and avoiding us, for example. So root plates and brash piles and those sorts of things that that Kappa can hide under. Marking fences is definitely a big thing. If we've got fences close to lek sites, the birds dispersing from that lek site, they're not marked. That's a real risk for Kappa. Scots pine is their kind of tree of choice. They will happily live in spruce and plantations as well. So it's not the case that they all live in old Scots pine wood, but Scots pine, and also mixed in with some other native species like birch and rowan as well, is important for sort of insect availability. And then predator control obviously would be another thing. So controlling foxes and crows, whilst we can't control pine martens and badgers, as they're a protected species as well, but we do know that they predate on Kappa. So predator control would be the other thing if the land manager was inclined to do that.
Okay, I think that's the last question that I've seen in the chat. If there are any others, now's your opportunity, but I'm very grateful to Carolyn for an interesting and informative talk.
Any other questions? Well, it just remains for me to also thank Caroline for, as Donald said, very interesting talk. It's quite thought-provoking about what we're going to do to save them, whether we give in on principles of predator control or limit what activities we do ourselves. But I'm very pleased that these issues are being brought out into the open. And I like very much the idea that if suitable notices are put up, people will take them into account. So anyway, let's fingers crossed for the future. And thank you very much, Caroline. Thank you.
No problem at all. Thanks so much. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for dialing in on a sunny evening.